Have you ever felt lost? Like, I don't know where I'm going, or at least I thought I knew where I was going, but clearly this isn't the way to get there. You know, I had a visitation in a hospital one time that was a hospital I had never been in, and I truly could not have been more lost. I thought about faking an injury just to try to get in somewhere, you know, sort of thing. Because when you feel like you're in a new place, you feel lost, you don't know what to do. Walking around, it's really frustrating. It's even more frustrating if you're driving. Now, thankfully, we live in a time where we've now got GPSs on our phones and maps on our phones, and it doesn't guarantee that we never get lost, but it certainly reduces the likelihood and the commonality. But I think most of us can remember a time where we did not have GPS on our phone. You know, do you ask the gas station guy for directions sort of thing? How do I find my way? And I was thinking back to a trip I took, I believe it was 1992. I think it might have been 1993, but I'm pretty sure it's 1992. But that time frame, and this freaks me out, that is every minute of 30 years ago, sort of thing. And life was really different then. I mean, Bonnie and I hadn't met yet. Technology was incredibly different. And so the girl I was seeing at the time, I was living in New York City, and we talked about it'd be kind of fun to take my mom on a trip up to New England. So we kind of put together this plan to come up to New England. We had a few different things we wanted to visit. I had just started rock climbing shortly before that. I knew New Hampshire had good rock climbing. Now, obviously, I wasn't planning a rock climbing trip with my mom. I mean, my mom's pretty cool, but I don't think my mom wants to be on the side of a cliff, sort of thing. But one of the planned days was shopping all day at Kittery, Maine. You can see my excitement already. And I'm like, you know, I might make alternate plans that day. And so I knew we're close to New Hampshire, so I didn't want to do full rock climbing. I didn't really want to bring all the gear for that. But there's something called bouldering, where you kind of do the rock climbing stuff, but close to the ground. But I didn't really know how to find anything. Now, back in 1992, we didn't have browsers like we do now. We didn't really have the internet the way we think of it today. It did exist, though. And because of my job, I actually had connectivity into the internet. And we used to use these things called news readers, where you kind of post to a message board. It's all text-based. You just kind of put messages in. And so I said, hey, I'm going to be near Kittery, Maine. I'm going to be in Kittery, Maine. I want to go bouldering. Anybody tell me what I can do? Now, back then, it would take days to get an answer sometimes. Not like, 12 seconds later, like now, sort of thing. But a few days later, some guy came back and said, oh, man, Pawtuckaway State Park. It's about a half hour away. You want to head over there? You'll be set. Okay, so this is the plan. I'm going to go to Pawtuckaway State Park from Kittery for half a day, climb for a bit, go back and pick up my mom and my girlfriend. Now, the guy gives me directions. So I drop my mom and my girlfriend off. I hop in the car, go to Pawtuckaway. Now, getting to Pawtuckaway State Park is pretty easy, right? There's signs and so forth. But he's like, oh, you don't want to go into the main entrance. Go around back. You'll see a dirt road. Now, if you've ever been on this backside of Pawtuckaway State Park, there's a dirt road. There's a few of them. And the landmarks are crazy. I don't want to get it. The landmarks he's giving me are crazy. I finally find a dirt road I believe is the dirt road. I drive down it, and again, the directions are drive 0.7 of a mile, all this kind of stuff. Park my car where I think I want it to be, because I've followed the directions, sort of thing. And now I have to get out and walk to the spot. And I'm not really where the marked trails are. But I'm ready. About 6 months earlier, I had gotten a new GPS device. This is 1992. Do you know what a GPS device tells you in 1992? What time it is, and latitude and longitude. The numbers that map out the world, right? There are no maps in it. You just get a number. So what you can do, though, is you can save those numbers. And also, GPSs were really slow back then. It could take minutes to get a signal. So I park my car. I don't want to get lost getting back to the car. So I go stand in the middle of the dirt road, fire up my GPS device, which is like this big, wait like 2 or 3 minutes, finally get a signal, and I save that. Okay, so now I know where my car's at. Start walking into the woods, and I'm following those directions, and I just got deeper in the woods. So I started asking other hikers for it. About 2 hours later, No kidding. About 2 hours later, I finally reached the rock. Remember, this is a half-day excursion, right? And I've just spent an hour driving, 2 hours walking. So I had to climb around for a bit. Didn't really have a very good time. And then I want to head back to the car. So I fire up my GPS device. Another thing that's changed about GPS. GPS can work really well with a very weak signal now. Incredibly weak signals. That was not true in 1992. You had to have a clear shot at the sky in the middle of the woods. Pull it out. Hey, it's doing nothing. Nothing. But now I know generally the direction towards the road. So finally, I just start walking generally in that direction. Eventually get to the road. In the road, I fire up my GPS, wait 2 or 3 minutes, realize I'm a mile from my car. So now I walk a mile back to my car, get in the car, get to Kittery way late, which made the rest of the day with my girlfriend awesome, by the way, which maybe that's why she's my ex-girlfriend, actually. Because it's clearly all her fault, right? Clearly. But what happened there, right? What happened? You know, I knew generally what direction throughout this whole thing, right? I knew generally what direction to go to get to the park. I knew generally what direction to get to where I wanted to park the car, generally. I knew generally how to get back. But the problem was I had no clarity. I needed clearer directions on how to get to the place in the park where I wanted to go. I needed a clearer signal for my GPS to work. Because with clarity, you move past moving in generally the right direction, and you actually start to get where you should go. As we continue the series we started last week, bumper cars, I want to think about this issue of clarity. Right? Because remember that in this series, what we're looking at is this idea that kind of life is a little bit like driving a bumper car. You know, you're trying to go along as best you can, but man, you're just getting bumped into all the time. And those bumps start to affect us. And sometimes those bumps just don't bump us around. Sometimes they knock us down. Right? Sometimes they frustrate us. And if we're not careful, those things start to change us, start to change our hopes for our lives, start to change the way we engage with our lives, starts to change the way we engage with other people. So last week, right, we actually spent some time and said, you know, we're going to step out and we're going to choose to use the Bible term, guard our hearts. In other words, that we want to actually take care of our inner self, that thing that's inside of us that I referred to last week as our true self, what's really happening inside of us. Because we talked about that if we don't keep our heart healthy, our emotional, our true self healthy, well, that's going to affect everything. Right? So what we said is that we'd spend some time, we said, okay, how do we kind of know that we're not as healthy as we might hope to be? And we talked about that. And then we went through some steps, specific steps we could follow to try to make things, kind of get to the bottom of it and kind of take a path that makes things better, that helps us to be healthy. Because we said that based on what we read from Proverbs last week, it says, you know, guard your heart because it affects the course of your life, the direction of your life. So if your heart is healthy, you begin to move generally in the right direction. But the thing we still need is clarity. Right? We still need to find clarity. Because a healthy heart gives us a solid foundation, and I truly believe that that's the starting point for everything we're going to talk about in this series. But to live our lives as we are fully able, to live our lives, to step in to do the impossible, to do those things that are bigger than we ever dream, to do those things that I believe that God calls all of us to do, what we really need to do is get a clearer sense of direction. We really need to know where we're going and what we're trying to do. Because if we go too long without that clear sense of specific direction, again, not always knowing the exact destination, but having confidence in each next step. If we go too long without those sort of things, it starts to exhaust us. And we start to get discouraged. And we start to question everything we do. Am I really heading in the right direction at all? And so we want to develop resiliency because the reality is that even on the correct journey, those things we talk about, like getting knocked down, those things still happen, right? Even with greater clarity. We will still take the wrong turn sometimes. Things won't work out the way we want them to sometimes, no matter how much we want them to work out that way. But we don't want to give up. But at the same time, we don't want to become a person who just plows forward all the time, no matter what all the signs look like. Because there are times where we do things for a time. But then it becomes time to move on. And we embrace the good we do in that time, recognizing that there's more good ahead. And we can trust God with everyone involved in that process. So, how do we get all that? Because what we're really looking for is this idea of resilience, direction, destination, as well as wisdom, right? Wisdom, the ability to look around us and understand what's happening, to have greater understanding. So that's kind of a lot of stuff. So how do we find that? Because I think it really comes down to, first of all, we have to recognize it's a lifelong pursuit. You know, whether you're 40 or you're 60 or you're 80 or you're 90 or whatever. This idea of growing in wisdom, growing in understanding, growing in resilience is critically important for all of us. And I really think that in order to really experience it, to really, really have it, we need some help. And the author of Proverbs, again, gives us some insight on this. The author of Proverbs says, "The Lord grants wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding." So the author of Proverbs believes that God will actually help us find those things, to find knowledge, to find understanding, but most importantly, to find wisdom. And the author of Proverbs goes on to say that if you do that, if you pursue those things, if you will listen to those things, something amazing will start to happen in your life. He says, "Then you will understand what is right, just, and fair, and you will find the right way to go. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will fill you with joy." Back to the heart again. That if our wisdom develops in our heart, I mean, certainly there are psychological and mental things that go with that, but there's also just that aspect of ourselves, those kind of innate ideas. And that's why our healthy heart is so important, because we can't really interpret wisdom clearly if our heart's not healthy. So, basically what the author of Proverbs is telling us is that God wants to tell us how to do these things. That if we will listen, God will tell us how. Because remember the verse before this, the one that's not on the screen anymore, it says, "From God's mouth." Now, obviously, it doesn't mean literally from God's mouth. But he's saying that God will speak to us, that God will actually tell us, if we will listen, he will tell us the things we need to know. So how do we listen? How do we hear God? Well, I think there are lots of ways that we hear God. I mean, one of the ways is when we come together, right? What we do here each Sunday morning, right? That I truly believe that as I speak, God speaks to you individually. And he guides us that way. I think other things we do together, that if you do, Bible studies or group studies, I mean, I've told you guys this before, since 2016, every Thursday morning at 6:30 a.m., me and 3 other guys get together. We read through a book. We may watch a video series. Over that hour we're together, the first half hours we catch up with each other on life. The second half hours we talk about what we're reading or what we're watching. And so God definitely speaks to us in those things as well. And I think all too often we can be tempted to stop with those sort of things. That I come out on Sunday mornings, or I got a group of people that I talk with. And those are really good things. I want to see you here every Sunday morning. But if we stop there, we're kind of missing out. Because God also wants individual time with us. That God actually invites us to have kind of daily personal things, daily personal time to actually hear from him. And it's really kind of interesting because the prophet Jeremiah, lived well before the time of Jesus. But as he wrote down what he was led by God to write down, he told us there was a day coming where God would start to speak to us in this incredibly, incredibly personal way. And what he says is that this is the new covenant I will make with the people of Israel after those days, says the Lord. So what Jeremiah is pointing forward to, as he kind of cites what God has told him, he's pointing to the days after Jesus. That with the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus, there was this new covenant. That's what we live under, is the new covenant. And that relationship will become much more personal. Because as it continues, God says, I will put my instructions deep within them, and I will write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. So Jeremiah is saying that in the time following Jesus, God has said that this relationship will become much more personal, that for those who put their faith in Jesus, that there's this direct, personal relationship, that actually God says, I will speak to their hearts. Now, if you have ever been in church, here with us, and as I share the message that God has put on my heart, does it ever feel like I'm only talking to you? Do you ever feel like you're the only person on the other end of that? Well, I got to tell you, I'm not that good. Right? Right? I share what God has put on my heart because I believe God speaks to me as he directs me in this. But when you get that feeling, that's God speaking to your heart. Right? That I am very blessed to play a very small part in that by, to the best of my ability, following his leading in what I write and what I say. But he speaks to your heart individually to give you that message. You are living out exactly what Jeremiah was pointing to. And just one quick thing. On the first part, it says that this new covenant is for the people of Israel. You go, well, I'm not the people of Israel. But that's okay, because if we look across the whole Bible, there are loads of references in the Bible that says the new covenant is for everyone. Kind of very famously, it's in Isaiah chapter 49, says that. There is a whole slew of New Testament references that this new covenant is for all people. That everyone who puts their faith in Jesus is invited into this new covenant. That God is seeking that kind of personal relationship with each of us. A one-to-one relationship with you. And that's the key to understanding. I think this is that if we want to really understand what God is inviting us into, and if we want to really engage in that incredible personal experience that comes with it, we need to think about relationships. So let's just kind of take a second and think about the person at any point in your life that you were absolutely closest to. You know, it's a good chance it's a spouse, might be a child, could be a sibling you're close to. But I think for many of us, it's probably a spouse. And as you think about those closest relationships, you probably enjoy going out to group events with those people. That person. It's nice to go out to a party or go out to a movie with a bunch of other people or go to dinner with a bunch of other people. Right? That's a great part of your relationship with that person. I mean, it's fantastic to do that stuff from time to time. But when are you closest with that person? When do you feel most close with that person? When it's just the two of you. Right? As wonderful as it may be as we go out with other people, something different happens when it's just you and that other person. Right? And you can really connect in a different sort of way. But now imagine this. What if suddenly, with that other person, you could only spend 1 hour once a week with that person? Probably around 10 on Sunday, sort of thing. Right? You wouldn't be satisfied with that. You wouldn't feel like you're really connecting with that person. Right? That you want that alone time. And you don't want alone time once a week. You want that alone time each day. Because I truly believe that God gives us deep personal relationships with each other, and I mean the deepest of relationships with each other, to help us understand the depth of a relationship he's seeking with each of us. And so if we want to understand what are the things we do that help us connect most closely with God, look at that person who's most special in your life. And there's probably a lot in common between both. Because I do believe in our relationship with God that we are absolutely enriched in these times together like this, but we need to seek those individual times. And I want to really be clear. We don't seek individual time because if we don't, God's going to get mad at us. We seek individual time with God because if we don't, I truly believe we're missing out. That we are missing that chance for God to speak even more deeply to our hearts, to really begin to lead us. And I think that if we want to really experience the kind of promises that Jeremiah is making, the kind of promises that Proverbs was making, we find those most completely in that individual time with God. So, what I would like to suggest is that each of us consider making individual time with God a daily part of our lives, no matter how long you've been a Christian. If you're still figuring out if you even want to be a Christian, to take that kind of time each and every day. And I'm going to actually suggest that each of us do 3 things every day. And these have been part of my daily practices for a while. I'm not bragging, right? I'm just telling you that what I see is that when you make these regular daily practices, things begin to change. And so there's 3 things I think we should all do. One is Bible. Read something from the Bible each day. The next one is meditate. No, right? Meditating on something is just thinking about it, right? To actually kind of run it over in your mind and just think about what it says or what it means. And then the last one is pray, right? And praying is just talking with God. Now, as I say all that, I think there's a good chance that some of us are like, well, that sounds really neat, but do you know my life? You want me to take time every single day and do all of this stuff? Man, I got so much going on. I am so busy. I got so much noise in my life. It's just not realistic. I mean, maybe once a week, maybe, but not every day. It's just too much. And it can get to be too much, but it doesn't have to be. Because I would like to suggest that I can get it down to 6 minutes a day. Each of us can find 6 minutes a day. Do you ever spend 6 minutes a day, looking at social media, watching TV, kind of vegging out, looking at the wall? Right? We all have 6 minutes, is all I'm saying. Right? We can all find 6 minutes. But how can I possibly do anything meaningful in 6 minutes? Well, thankfully, I have a 3-point plan. Right? So let's go through it. How can we do all this in 6 minutes? Okay, first one, Bible. People will tell you all kinds of things you need to do. That there are people who really are very big on this idea of read the entire Bible in a year. I don't even want to do that sort of thing, right? I read a lot of Bible, right? And I'm not putting people down who do it. If you grow into it, it's a really cool thing. A lot can come from that if you grow into it over time. But it doesn't need to be like that. One word from God created the entire universe. What can one verse from God do in our lives? Right? So that's what I'd like to suggest. Because I think you can actually, in fact, I know you can engage with the Bible every day, even if you don't have one. Because we live in a time of technology. Right? So there's something out there called the YouVersion Bible app. Guys, I did a whole kind of sermon on this like a year and a half ago. All the kind of things it could do. But the YouVersion Bible app is a 100% free app. It doesn't ask for money. You don't pay for it, nothing. It's a totally free application. It's actually underwritten by a large church out in Oklahoma who actually does all that. So it's a totally free app. It's loaded up with all kinds of English versions of the Bible, the ones that we commonly use here, like the New International Version, the NIV, the NLT. Those are in there, plus King James, loads of others are all inside of there. And so I want you to just go out to your app store or your Play Store if you're on Google, same thing. Right? Go out there, look for the YouVersion Bible app. Now be careful, there are a lot of other Bible apps that are not as good. I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not as rich in features as the YouVersion is. So download the YouVersion Bible app, and when you install it, the first time you run it, it's going to ask you to allow notifications. Right? Do that. Now I normally do not allow notifications. But on this one, you're going to want to do it because it's not going to bombard you with notifications. But what it is going to do is once a day, it's going to send you a notification about the verse of the day. So you don't even have to remember to look for it. It will pop up in your phone. You can, by default, it comes out at 8:45 in the morning. You can change that to a different time if you want to. So you get a notification of that verse, and when the notification comes up, if you tap on it, it will take you to a screen that looks like this. It will take you inside the app to the verse of the day screen. Now in there, you'll see the verse itself. And so the verse that happens to be, I captured this yesterday, is that even there, your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. It tells you the address, in other words, the book, chapter, and verse. Right? This one is Psalm 139:10. So all that's right there. But also, it gives you a video. Okay? Each day there is a very short video, about 1 to 2 minutes long. And that's someone who will actually talk about that verse for a minute or two, just explaining what's going on inside of it. So that means that your Bible reading time is about 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes. And you don't even have to remember to do it. Your phone will remind you each day. All right, so now we've got Bible in our day. That easily, we've got the Bible in our day. Now what about the next one? What about meditate? Again, meditate's kind of an intimidating word because we kind of picture these guys who can go kind of into these really deep states of meditation. That's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about think about it. Don't just read it and forget it. Just take some time to think about it. So how do we keep this short? Well, what I'm going to encourage you to do is grab a notebook, a sheet of paper, anything that you can write on. I want you to write 2 things on it. After you read the verse of the day, I want you to write down the verse address. In other words, Psalm 139:10 in this case, right? Whatever the address was on the screen. Just so you'll have that there handy. And then I want you to write one sentence about something you thought or felt about the verse, what the person explaining it to you said, any of those things. Just one sentence. And then take that with you that day. Throw it in your car, throw it in your bag, throw it in your backpack if you have one, whatever you carry around with you. And whenever you have downtime during the day, read it and think about it. Or if you're going to go drive for 20 minutes, just read it real quick before the drive, and then think about it during the drive. If you're waiting in line, if you're waiting at the doctor's office, just think about it. But all that time is free time. You're waiting anyway. You couldn't do anything else. All you needed was about 2 minutes to think about what you just read and write it down in one sentence. You can write more if you want to, but be really careful about that. If we start writing too much, it starts to become burdensome. And also remember that no one else is going to read it. Grammar doesn't have to be perfect. Spelling doesn't have to be perfect. If you look at the things I write to myself, they're like code because no one can read them except me. But it doesn't matter. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm just trying to do it quickly, and it's just for me. And that's the thing to remember. It's just for you. So you can do that in about 2 minutes. And then the last one, pray. Pray each day. Now, if you have an existing prayer routine, just stick with that. If that's working for you, stick with it. I'm not trying to change any existing practices of yours. But if you don't have a routine, I'd like to suggest one. Now again, as people pray, you pray whatever works for you. Praying is just talking to God. That's all it is. If you have kind of memorized prayers that you find work for you, say those. That's fantastic. I really encourage people to just say what they're thinking or feeling, sort of thing. But sometimes it's still kind of hard to kind of create a daily prayer routine. It can feel a bit intimidating sometimes. So what I would like to suggest, if you do not have an existing prayer routine, I have a 2-minute version for you. Right? Now, one thing is that keep in mind, you can pray anywhere, anytime. Right? You don't have to kneel somewhere. You don't have to be alone. You know, you can pray while you're driving. Keep your eyes open if you're driving, sort of thing, right? But you can pray anywhere. But there is something important about dedicated prayer time, even if it's short. So I would encourage each of us to do at a time of day that works for you. I'm a morning person, so I do mine in the morning. Some people like evening. But pick a time of day that works for you. Find a quiet place. And you may say, there are no quiet places in my house. Then you have a car. Go sit in the car. I know people who get quiet time in their car. Absolutely. Just go sit in the driveway for a second. The neighbors are going to talk about you, but they're talking about you anyway, right? So you might as well be with God while they're doing it, sort of thing, right? So find a quiet place wherever that is for you. I do encourage you to close your eyes. There's something about closing the world out that just seems to, for me and for most people I know, helps center us a little bit. And then I want you to pray just a couple of things. When you pray, just thank God for 3 things. You know, Saturday morning a week ago, when it was minus 17 degrees, I thank God that I was indoors with heat, because we can lose sight of those things, right? Life can weigh us down about all the things we don't have and aren't working. That sometimes we lose sight of those fundamental things that we start to take for granted are really important, right? So, you know, things like that. Just thank God for any 3 things that's going on in your life. But I would encourage you to think about it, though. Just try to make it meaningful, but just any 3 things. Tell God one thing you're concerned about. You don't have to go on at length. God tells us that he already knows what we need. But just tell him one thing you're concerned about. If there's something you're struggling with, if there's somebody in your family you're concerned about, if there's something you're worried about. And then tell him one thing you're happy about. That's a prayer. It would take about 2 minutes. Now, I would really encourage you to make this a really part of your daily routine. Because that's what really starts to change us, is that if we start to make this part of our daily routine, it really becomes more ingrained with us, and we start to connect more deeply. If you, as you do it each day, I would encourage you to do it around the same time, whatever time works for you. But don't be militant about it. If you miss a day, don't get hung up about it. Don't worry about it. Just do your best to get back on it the next day. The key is to do your best to do it each day. And again, how long does it take? Well, if we look at it, right, using the YouVersion Bible app, about 2 minutes each day. A verse of the day. Again, God created the entire universe with one word. How powerful is one verse? Actually, one phrase, let there be light, right? But created the whole universe in one phrase. So how powerful is one verse? So 2 minutes there. 2 minutes of meditation, right? Just writing down the verse address and one sentence about it. And then your prayer time. Thank God for 3 things. Tell him one thing you're nervous about or concerned about, and one thing that you're happy about. That is a grand total of 6 minutes. I say this with encouragement, not finger wagging. We all can find 6 minutes in the course of a day. And I truly believe it's kind of, it's 6 minutes that will change your entire relationship with God. Because what it does is it pulls us from being just someone who just kind of consumes, right? And I don't mean that negatively, but in terms of kind of just being there and just receiving it in that one way, to something that's much more of a relationship where we're hearing from God, we're thinking about it. And as we think about it, we will hear more from God as we do that. It may feel awkward at first, but it will happen over time. And we're talking with God, and we call that a relationship. And the power of that personal relationship will truly transform everything. I promise you, if you make this a daily habit, you will begin to experience something. And one of the things that I want to, caution us about, that as you do this for a bit, for some of us, we're going to start to feel this need to start doing more. Read more of the Bible, pray more. Hey, those are good things in time. That as time goes on, as we go deeper into it, that is absolutely good stuff. But what you don't want to do is start upping the burden so much that you just stop doing it. We are way better off with a daily short routine than, a big complex routine that we pull off once a week, that then becomes once a month, that becomes once in a while, till it becomes once upon a time. Right? It's that daily routine that is transforming. So keep it simple. As you're deeply ingrained in it, certainly feel free to up it. But don't load yourself down. But through this practice, your relationship with God will change. And you will start to have a different kind of resilience inside, where we're not so dependent on circumstances for confidence. that we're not so dependent for things always going the way we wanted to, for joy. That we start to realize that God is truly in control, that God is guiding us along the way, and He's there with us. And in that, we start to step out to do more, to be confident doing more, and knowing that even as we fall, right, even as we sink into the water, as Peter did, Jesus is there to lift us up. But also, we start to recognize that we can do more than we imagined, and the noise doesn't matter. It doesn't have to distract us, because the one who created it all is walking with us. And with that, we start to have a greater sense of certainty. And well, that's not the right word I want to use. We have a greater sense of just kind of where we're heading to, that we move from moving generally in the right direction to starting to have clarity, and that we can start to go in that place where we're really called towards. You won't always know the destination. In reality, in my experience, we rarely don't know the end destination. What we're looking for is confidence that each step is the next right step. And then in that, as we do that with clarity, then we start to go where we're meant to go. We become able to do the sort of things we're meant to do, and we do more than we ever dreamed.